Hey friends, how you doing? So I'm doing a mini series called Hear Me Out, highlighting conversations and the voice of persons with special needs. I was inspired to do this conversation after I released an episode called Chronicles of a Hard of Hearing Girl. This episode highlighted the personal journey of a young lady who is hard of hearing and has been living with hearing loss for a huge part of her life. And I was inspired to talk about persons who live with disabilities, the challenges of living with disabilities, and how we all can do better to support everyone who lives with disabilities. And what better way to do that than to talk to people who either work in that area, who are living with a disability, or who are supporting people with disabilities. So this is the intent of this mini series. I hope you tune in. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you share it as well. And if you do learn something from it, be sure to DM me, connect with me on social media on Real Talk Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, you can also send me an email at unfilteredrealtalk@gmail.com. I hope you enjoy the mini-series. Make sure to check it out wherever you get podcasts, including Apple and Spotify, and also on YouTube. If you do, thank you so much for doing so. Thank you so much for stopping by to listen. I'm your host, EJ. This is the first episode within the mini-series called Hear Me Out, highlighting the voice of persons with special needs. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it inspires you. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Unfiltered Real Talk podcast. Today we're talking about creating inclusive content for the deaf community. And with me to talk about this is a young lady who is doing exceptionally well, creating content that is both engaging and informative. And she is Kellina Powell. Kellina, welcome, and thank you so much for giving me your time today. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, so we're talking about creativity and making sure that when we are creating content for social media, that it is inclusive. That's what we want to talk about today. So I want to start out by asking you to please introduce yourself and share a little bit more about who you are and why you wanted to come talk to me about this conversation today.
Like you said, my name is Kellina, and I am finally a graduate student from psychology. I am starting up my own mental health coaching business online for those who are deaf and for those who have a disability. And I am actually writing a book as well, so upcoming author.
Wow.
I'm super excited
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm be providing a lot of courses for people to learn more about how to be inclusive. The reason why I came on here to speak to you is because I feel like there's a lot of lack of information about the deaf community, especially communicating with somebody.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? It's not just for someone who's deaf, but also exactly, especially it's important because I feel like communication is super big, especially COVID, the mask. Right? People are now starting to see the challenge, and I tell people, see, can you imagine what we deaf people have to go through?
I know.
So I feel like, yeah. So it's really mindful and rewarding for a lot of people to finally have that wake up call thanks to COVID. They're able to educate people on it. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. And can you share a little bit about your upcoming book?
My upcoming book, yeah.
What it's about, so we can anticipate, we can look forward to it.
Yeah. So it's basically a biography of my life in the hearing community, but it's mixed with poetry. So it's gonna be poem and it's gonna be really cool. I mean, I love it.
Oh my gosh, that's very creative. Looking forward to your book for sure. So you also have a YouTube channel. Can you talk about what you're trying to do with that as well?
Yeah, for sure. What I'm trying to do with the YouTube channel is basically show my life and show people what it's like, and also uplift those who are deaf, help them that they can communicate with the hearing world, because being a deaf person, it's very hard to kind of come up out of a shell, because it's not something easy that we go through. And I feel like a lot of time the deaf community don't have anybody to look up to or anybody that can help them to get into the hearing community. I feel like that's where it is. The problem is. So
Absolutely.
that's why I'm making a YouTube channel.
I'm so glad you're making that channel, and I want to encourage our listeners to go check out Kellina's YouTube channel. I think it's called Deaf Queen Boss on YouTube.
Yes.
Okay. So check out Kellina's YouTube channel, Deaf Queen Boss. And I'm going to tag that on here on this podcast so that people can go check out and see a little bit about what she's doing, sharing her story and her journey, as well as trying to inspire people to be inclusive and to be more integrative with the deaf and hard of hearing community. So what was that like going to high school, going to university, because you just graduated from psychology? What was university experience versus high school experience like, going to school as someone who is deaf?
So for me, going to high school, it was very challenging because teachers never came across someone that is deaf.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, mine did not. So it was really challenging because they were kind of putting me down in a negative way because they thought I couldn't do the work. And they thought I was taking advantage of my disability, which got me really upset. And when I got to university, it got a lot better because I feel like they were more
Prepared?
skilled. Yeah. So I feel like that it was definitely my experience.
And what are some of the things that you did to overcome those challenges?
Honestly, improve myself, advocating for myself, consistently talking
Okay.
to the teachers, students, even other students are trying to help each other, right? And I feel like for university and college, I feel like they're just there for the money. But a lot of time, if a student work together, it's a whole big team, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like that's how I overcome my struggles, especially in school. Work with peers, group system, and I'm working with my disability counselor to figure out ways how I can become successful in school.
Which you have been, right? And that's amazing.
Yeah,
You are a graduate right now. And I hear that you are interested in going to grad school. I saw that in
yes,
one of
I
your
am.
videos.
Yes. In
Okay.
my grad school, I wanted to do mental health in addition. I got accepted to start
Yay!
music Monday.
Congratulations.
Woo! Yeah,
Yes.
thank
Yeah. Which
yes.
university?
It's a college actually.
Okay.
It's at Plumbing College, which is in Canada, Toronto, and Peterborough.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations, Kellina. I
Thank
think you're just
you.
breaking grounds and breaking chains and stereotypes. And that's amazing when young ladies can do this. It's so inspiring. And that's why I love to have people such as yourself on the podcast to share the experience and hopefully inspire whoever will be listening. So I want us to talk about some of the issues with regard to deafness, speech, lip reading, sign language, or any other thing that you think is relevant, and help us to break any kind of myth, right, or stereotype with regard to either deafness, lip reading, sign language. So, for example, people assume that everyone who is deaf can lip read. And in getting ready for this podcast, I discovered that is not true. So, I know that you can. Can you share with us and help us understand how some of these things happen and why some are true and maybe not true?
Some be true and some may not be true because it's all depend on how the person was raised.
Okay.
Because everybody's being raised different. For me, for example, being raised in a hearing family, knowing that I was the first deaf person in the family, I did not pick up the sign language because my family didn't really think it was about language was important because they were thinking that no one's gonna take the time to learn that. Which is true. A lot of time now I'm getting older, now it makes sense what they were trying to say. And it's true they don't not a lot of people really have the time to learn that because school would never teach us that communication skills with someone that is deaf. And so
So
for
when you
me,
mean, sorry to interrupt, but when you mean you have to learn it, does that mean like leap reading is a formal training? Like you have to be trained by somebody?
not trained by somebody, but it's automatic. Like I don't know how to explain it. It just happened. So when you
Okay.
become deaf, you have to look at the lips. So in order to communicate, because when we hear words like a sentence, for example, for me, I don't hear both sentences without reading the lips. If that makes
Okay.
sense.
So you need to see the person you're communicating with.
Yeah, you have to.
Okay.
Every deaf person have
Okay.
to.
Every deaf person.
Yeah, every deaf person. Yes.
So I'm thinking people who use things like voice notes to communicate. Clubhouse is so big right now. Twitter Space, those kinds of environment.
Yeah.
How are we how are we including the deaf community in these platforms? Because you can't see the person you're
So
communicating with.
right. So for example, Clubhouse and for myself, I have two phones actually. So one phone is for closed caption. So on Clubhouse, I put my actual phone on speaker and I put it together, and then the word caption showed up automatic. Or I use Google Meet to help me as well. So that's definitely something 100% help. And that's basically what I'm trying to say is a lot of people who use auto app do multitasking because there's another phone, there's a laptop in front of us. There are other things that are in front of us to help us to understand what the person's saying, especially if it's auto app.
Now, let's talk about those strategies now. You started talking about that, talking about closed captioning. So, for content creators such as myself, yourself as a YouTuber, podcasters, and all the other influencers out there who are utilizing social media, share with us some of the strategies and good tips that will ensure that we can be better communicators and also inclusive of the deaf community.
I would say number one, use closed caption. Do not summarize your caption. Please do not. I noticed a lot of people summarize what they're saying. Don't do that.
Okay.
Three, we study body language. So when we noticed that someone, for example, a post I saw and it was so rude, it was not towards me, but it was towards other disability people. And so I just want people to be mindful of how they're using and representing themselves, especially on social media. The first thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of people do not know this. A lot of deaf community, like a lot of people I know that is hard of hearing or deaf, they actually be on TikTok more than Instagram. The reason for that is because there's a lot more closed caption on TikTok than Instagram. So that is something
Okay.
a lot of people who should know.
That's really good to know. Yeah, yeah. So closed captioning, I think it's a big one. I think most places have that. As a podcaster, there's a setting for that. YouTube has that as well. And like you said, TikTok is really big. So it's just making sure that you use those resources that are available for you as a social media user, influencer, or as a content creator to make sure that you are inclusive of the deaf community or other communities as well. So it just depends on who you're making sure that we are all involved and included. So, what about practical technical tips? Like, is there things we need to do with our microphone? You know, you talked about body gesture and body language. Are there some do's and don'ts that we should be mindful for, either technical skills or just in general?
I would say, especially podcasters, I would highly recommend a lot of people to look out for the microphone to make sure there's no echo, there's no scratches, make sure there's no background noises, especially if you have children or dog is barking. You want to avoid that at all costs. That it's very important to make sure that you use a right tone for your voice. I know a lot of people talk a little fast, like myself. I talk really fast because I'm from the
Mhm.
island. I'm Jamaican, so I understand.
Yeah.
So sorry. So I tell people my bad.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So I can relate to this one. When I'm really nervous, I tend to talk really fast and then my words start to jumble and
right.
juxtapose upon each other. So I actually had to train myself to speak slow. So instead of me speaking too fast, I force myself to pause. And I know sometimes pausing can be awkward for a lot of people. They want words for fillers. But that's what I did. That's what worked for me. But if you speak really fast, just in general, like Kellina is saying that she speaks fast, then you also need to watch
Yes.
that, right? So you need to
Yes.
watch that.
Yes.
And so tone is a big deal, you said. And what about some do's and don'ts that people like you see people do to the deaf community? And I know you pointed one out with regard to when you were in high school and watching some of your videos, you talked about them extensively. But can you share with us some of the things that people do that they should not be doing, some of the stereotypes that you've come across when people find out that you're wearing a hearing aid or they feel like, oh, there's something off with her speech. What are some of those do's and don'ts that you want us to just stop already?
I would say that don't assume if you meet someone that is deaf that they know sign language. Because like myself, I do not know sign language. And I would tell people, well, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I thought you know. No, not every deaf person who speaks do sign
I would be
language.
so embarrassed if I just assumed that you knew sign language and I'm like, doing all these fancy things and feeling cool, like I'm doing something awesome. And then you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, literally. I was just like, no, honey, no. And the second thing is, I would say is, do not think about disability like the people have specific look. I feel like a lot of people have that image of what a disability person should look like. A lot of times I always be like, what are you talking about? So I just want people to do not assume too much too fast about things, because it's not good for the deaf community to feel uncomfortable being around you, right? So you don't want to assume too much. Like the third thing I want to say is, don't assume too much. Ask questions. If you have something to ask them. Don't be afraid. We're willing to be there to help you to learn how to walk.
Yes, we all know that saying, when you assume, you make an ass of you and me. So please do not
Yeah.
assume, just ask questions. And that is a principle of life. So, I think in this case, it hugely applies. But in general, when you don't know something, just ask. Before we come to a close, we're getting close to the end. I want to talk about where you see yourself in the next 5 years.
My goal is to change the world in terms of how to be inclusive.
Okay.
And my second thing is, my goal is to create an app for disability community, so they all can come in together, especially if somebody is looking for a friend that have disability. So, and the third thing is, I want to make a children's book, because there's no deaf children's book. So I really
Ah,
wanted to create a
I
deaf
didn't know
children's
that. So
book.
there are no deaf children's books?
No,
Wow.
no. I actually worked with the audiologist, and I asked them that question. They said, actually, no. Yeah. So, and then my goal is to, create a community across the world, even create charity work across the world for people who are deaf, especially those who are struggling to pay for the equipment for the hearing aid, because it's really expensive. So I have a lot of big goal dreams down the next 5 years. But right now I have a lot going on, but I'm really going to take my step by step.
Yes, absolutely. Baby steps. And honestly, you're so young, and you're just getting started, and you're already, like, your social media already exploded, as I saw on Instagram,
Yeah.
So it's amazing. I had a young lady who also has partial deafness from Nigeria come talk to me about her experience a little while ago. And, that is exactly what she shared as well, is that there's not enough out there to support people with hearing loss and young people who were deaf or partially deaf. And so she is looking for ways to kind of help people get that awareness, and then ways to also help people take care of equipment. So sometimes you can't afford the equipment, or you can afford it, but then you don't know what to do when it comes to like maintenance and repairs. So this young lady Anne's episode is really inspiring, and also just very closely aligns with what you're sharing today with regard to what you're doing, what you ladies are doing to support inclusiveness within the deaf community. So I would say, so you've talked about the app and a book for deaf kids. What other solution would you like to see, like in terms of a macro level, a bigger scale? And this could be solutions that you want to see in academia, in schools, in government, in employment, just in general. What is one key solution that you think would make a huge difference in the deaf community?
I would say a more support in terms of just letting people share the world and experience. It's more of like letting other people come out together as a team.
And when they do come out, being supportive, because I know a lot of people, if you go online, there's a lot of people's experience out there where they go and interview for certain jobs, and when they find out that they have this disability or this special need, and then they suddenly don't get the opportunity for that position. So people keeping an open mind, across the world, that everyone is capable of doing a job. Like, it's not anything to do with a special need. It's about giving them the access and letting them actually get a chance to do it. So
yes,
I'm gonna close by asking if you had. So you're from the Caribbean. You're from Jamaica, and I think St. Lucia as
St.
well.
Lucia. Yes.
St. Lucia.
Yes.
Okay. So if you had the chance to go to St. Lucia, just for fun, what is the first thing that you would do if you get a chance to go back to visit?
I would say the first thing I do is go visit my grandma's auntie because she passed away last year. So that is something I would do.
Okay, so thank you so much, Kellina. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you for this opportunity.
No pressure. Have a good day.
Today's conversation was also recorded by video. Please check it out on YouTube. And also, please consider subscribing at Unfiltered Real Talk Podcast. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to the very end of this conversation. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I truly hope that inspired you. If you enjoyed the conversation, please consider rating wherever you listen and connect with me on social media with what you enjoyed, or maybe something that you did not enjoy that you would like to see in another conversation. So connect with me with a comment and your feedback. Let's keep continuing to do and inspiring to do what is right and kind. I'll see you in the next episode.